Hello there and welcome to my YouTube channel, Climbinator 1978 or 1978, whichever way you, the viewers, want to pronounce it. Today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about a very special horror film to me. It is a horror film that, despite being adapted from one of Stephen King's short stories in his anthology book Nightmares and Dreamscapes, it's very little known outside the Stephen King fans and horror movie fans in general. Hardly anyone knows about it. It's actually a film that was made in 1997 with the ambition to be released theatrically, and it did get a limited theatrical release. However, because it was released initially on HBO, because Paramount, I believe, were the ones who got the initial rights or something, but their release schedule for 1997 turned out to be fully booked. So HBO showed it on their channel 3 months before, I think it was New Line or some other studio put it on a limited theatrical release. I can't remember, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, the film is called Stephen King's The Night Flyer. Now, I first saw this on sale in Woolworths in Britain in 2001. I wasn't old enough to buy it, so unfortunately, I didn't get to see it until 2003, but the cover I saw was the infamous, notorious cover which reveals the killer's face on the DVD and video. Yeah, it's not this now other more popular cover that has been circulating since on DVDs. And I think this is the better version, because when I first watched this in 2003, what I was surprised about is that although we know the name identity of the killer, we don't actually know the physical identity of the killer until the reveal at the end. Yeah. The film is about a killer called Dwight Renfield and how he gains the attention of sleazy reporter Richard Dees. We the viewers, follow Richard Dees as he trails Dwight Renfield's bloodied rampage, bloodied reign of terror across all the states in the story. Renfield flies a black Cessna Skymaster plane from airport to airport, and Dees has his own plane that he can fly from crime scene to crime scene. And he has his camera and his notepad, and that's the story in a nutshell. I will further elaborate on the story and the characters in a minute, but yes, when I first watched this film, it was part of a Stephen King season on the Sci-Fi Channel in the United Kingdom, way back in 2003, when they actually showed good films on that channel. And one weekend they had the 2-part TV series of It. Then the following weekend they had the 2-part TV series of Salem's Lot, which were my first viewings of those shows, and I really enjoyed them. And my hopes were really optimistic about this film, but I really enjoyed it. Anyway, on to the characters now. Richard Dees, played by the late, great, and ever awesome to watch Miguel Ferreira. I must admit, I didn't know what to make of him on my first viewing. I knew he was ruthless, and I just saw him as someone who wanted to get the job done. But yes, he's a sleazy, arrogant, nasty piece of work reporter who takes someone's story of misery and he twists and turns it to his own pleasure so that he can just be on the front page of Inside View, which is a parody of the National Enquirer, one of the most sleaziest tabloids you could find in the King universe. But the thing is, Dee's work, according to his editor, has been running a bit dry lately. It's been running a bit low, and he's lacking in his enthusiasm. Well, he looks the most enthusiastic here, doesn't he? And his editor in the film is kind of like the Stephen King version of J.K. Simmons's J. Jonah Jameson, but looks a bit more like Brains from Thunderbirds. He's quite a character, actually, Merton Morrison. And the pairing of them is actually hilarious. Anyway, Dees is told about this serial killer who's flying around airports, mutilating victims and draining their corpses of all the blood. Dees passes the story on to his rookie reporter who has just joined the branch, and that is Catherine, who he mockingly calls Jimmy, as in Jimmy Olsen, Blair. She takes the story, and Dees is quite content with working on his story at the moment, story of a country star with AIDS. However, that is soon going to change, because this is at the point where we've already seen an opening kill, which is the second murder in Renfield's reign. But yes, this is about to change when Dees is followed out of work to a bar by Catherine, and she just wants some insight into what it's like to work at Inside View. Dees pretends to pally up to her, and she comes across as being kind of like Lois Lane in Superman stories at first. And he, as I say, he pallies up to her at first, but then he suddenly snaps and says, "What the fuck do you think you have the right to do, telling me how to go about my job when I've been doing this job for years? Hey, god damn it!" And he basically mocks her background of reporting, where she worked for the Herald. However, he reduces her to tears and she storms off. As this all happens, another couple of murders happen involving an elderly couple, where it starts off that scene where the elderly wife is sat outside the bungalow with an extension for a control tower. She's sat outside and she's just looking at this black Cessna Skymaster and admiring it as if some celebrity has landed. And then we, the viewers, hear some scuffle going on inside the bungalow with an old man's voice shouting, "Help me!" And of course, we know that it's Mr. Renfield striking again. And the old lady, dressed in a white gown, is walking up towards the front window, all smiles, like as if she's on pot or crack. And we see this black cape swoop over the side of the window. Then all of a sudden, as a jump scare, we get this old man pressed up against the window with blood on his hands going, "Help me, help me, help me," before he's dragged away, and the collisions and scuffle inside is getting more and more intense. And the old lady's just fine as she's walking in to the bungalow. She's just fine about her husband being mutilated, you know, because she's under some kind of hypnotic trance. She walks in, goes to the bedroom, powders her nose. As this is happening, the husband is calling out in the background saying, "Please no, please no, please no." And then he gives out this almighty agonising scream of pain, which is his last breath. We don't see the mutilation on screen. We just see it in silhouette, and his scream is in the background as the camera focuses on the wife as she goes off to powder her nose. You know, she's quite happy that she's about to be killed. Yep. And then the vampire turns to look towards her, walks up towards her, and as she's standing in the doorway with a smile, tilting her neck up, we see Renfield's silhouette shadow forming over her. Camera fades out, and then it cuts to the next day where Dees is walking into Merton Morrison's office. Yep. I must say that scene has always creeped me out. And yet there's hardly any lines of dialogue. So, yep. Conjuring movies, take a note. Take a note from the professionals here. Well done, Night Flyer. Conjuring movies suck. And you've proved it. But, yeah. This movie, I'm telling you people, this movie walked. So, Conjuring and Insidious and those type of movies of today could fly. Those type of movies literally have taken notes from movies like this one. Lots of ideas from those movies have come from movies like this. And it's criminal that the movie that you see photos of here isn't getting enough recognition. It doesn't even have a Blu-ray release. Come on, bring on the Blu-ray release. This is a 10 out of 10 movie from me. And you can get it for free on YouTube. But yes, Dees finds out about the double murders. Yep. And he changes his mind and goes, he decides to take on the case of investigating these stories. I must say, I think that this scene with the elderly couple is probably my favourite vampirism scene. This movie is actually my favourite vampire movie, period. Even more so than Salem's Lot. The reason why I like it is actually because it's the feeling of, you know, treating the vampire mythos as though it could actually happen. It's that kind of like, what if, you know? What if the unbelievable became believable? And the point about this story is that as you watch along throughout the rest of the film, you discover that Dees is a character who's been spreading lies upon lies upon lies in his stories only for the unbelievable to become believable. And therefore, it's a case of the little boy who cried wolf one too many times. So therefore, when the wolf came along, no one believed him. Well, let's face it, who would believe you if Count Dracula was stood up right behind you? But yeah, what I like about this scene is that it actually has an Easter egg right here in the image. See, a lot of people probably thought nothing of it, or, you know, a lot of the people that have seen this scene. But I always thought there was something particular about this scene, and that is, if you look at the old lady here, Ellen Sarch, played by Elizabeth McCormick, she has the same hairstyle and colouring, as well as a white gown, which is a similar type to what Doris Leachman wore in the film Bride of Frankenstein. And because she's become, well, her character has become a familiar to Mr. Renfield, Dwight Renfield, played by Michael H. Moss. The thing is, she's technically a bride of a horror movie character. See, I love it when you find Easter eggs like this in films that you think wouldn't have them. And also, a lot of people have speculated that the old lady here is actually the young woman in Dwight's photo album at the end of the movie. I don't think that's the case, because the age of the young woman in the film is in her 20s. And yet, the woman specified as being elderly in the contemporary time was 62. And if you do the mathematics, it wouldn't work out. So what I think Dwight Renfield does with his elderly lady victims, elderly female victims, I should say, is he hypnotises them to a point where on the day they later die, he gets them to go into town and make themselves look like his wife. Anyway, Dees takes the story back, and Catherine / Jimmy Blair is forced by the editor to go onto a different story. Catherine is not happy about this. So she tears up her ticket, throws it into the air, because Dees has his own plane, and Dees says that he's, going to go from crime scene to crime scene by himself. Yeah. This is not going to lead to a plot point, is it? And I must admit, when I was watching this film when I was much younger, I must admit I thought Julie Entwistle, who plays Catherine, would have made a great Lois Lane at the time. She kind of reminds me of Gail Weathers in this film. Her performance does. Reminds me of a younger Gail Weathers type. A lot of people who've reviewed this film say that she reminds them of an actress called Phoebe Cates. I'm not familiar with her work, but I've seen some people's reviews, and yeah, I can see some similarities, I guess. She does remind me of another actress, though. I think it's more Anne Hathaway from like the 2010s time. Yeah. Anyway, Dees flies off and he decides to investigate the first murder, which is Claire Ellis Bowie. And Dees does these tape recordings at several points in the film. He records for himself to make his journal notes. This was in the days before we had phones, people. So, yep. And this is where he shows his most bolshiness towards people, because when he meets the locals who knew the victims, he acts towards them with a little bit of generosity. But when he does his tapes, he shows what he really thinks about them. And he's just an arsehole. Literally. Like, he calls one old fella who's grieving over the loss of his friend, he calls that old fella an old shithead. That guy here, to be honest. But it's this old guy who actually gives Dees quite a lot of info about the suspicious activity that led to his friend's death. Like suspicious activity from the night before, where the Cessna plane landed. And he saw this guy coming out with a black cloak. And when he went to start his shift the next day, he found his friend who he alternated shifts with and would often chat with. He found his friend was just simply washing the entire plane down. And that was unusual. And when he questioned his friend about it, he said his friend was just doing his part is all. Then when he talks to the hair salon stylist for the old lady I mentioned earlier, she said that the lady came in 2 weeks earlier than her usual schedule, her usual monthly schedule, that is. She said that was unusual, and she was acting like she had a crush on someone, and it was totally out of character for her, and her skin was so high. And this pilot that she met the previous night, you know, it was like her and her husband had known him all their life, and that the stylist knew that wasn't true. And I thought, okay. And also when they pop by, when Dees goes to a gas station attendant to fill his car up, the gas station attendant says their behaviour was really suspicious. As you can see here, the wife is trying to kind of like seduce her husband right there a little bit, where she says to him, "Let's go, dear. Honey, he's waiting for us." As all this is happening, the editor notices that Catherine is still investigating the night flyer behind his back, and he's getting impatient about Dees not sending him details about what he's found. So he tells Catherine to continue investigating the night flyer and go to this motel, basically. He tells her to go to this motel. However, he doesn't tell her that Dees is there in the room right next to hers. And yeah, he thinks they'll compete against each other, but Dees thinks one step ahead and tells Catherine that in order to beat Morrison at his game, because Morrison wants us to compete against each other, he wants us to compete against each other, so therefore we got to work together. And I'm telling you now, I'm dry on all my investigation lines. So if we work together, we'll be able to get the night flyer and get that photo of him. Now, they begin phoning all of the airports in all the state or all the states, I would say. And I'm telling you, they get down to the last one, which is Wilmington. And I really wish I could go on further into the story details, but I don't want to spoil the third act. I really don't, because not only is the book ending horrific, but the film ending is horrific as well, and they differ from each other quite a bit, but they're both equally as effective as each other. And if I had to pick which one was better, I would say the film ending is, because it's more within character of Dee's. And I really wish I could go into more detail, but I don't want to. Okay, but all I can say is I saw Jeepers Creepers 2 years before seeing this film. And I saw Jeepers Creepers 2 the same year as this film. I saw both of them in the cinemas when they were released, yeah? Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2. And I thought they were, scary films. But nothing, I repeat, nothing when it comes to horror sticks in my mind like the ending of this movie. I mean, Jesus Christ. This movie's ending is just... it's messed up. And creepy as shit. I mean... oh my God. Anyway, on to my overall view. This film is a classic that slipped through the cracks. And it should either get a re-release theatrically, and I mean a full re-release. Not a limited, I mean a full re-release. If you can't do that, Hollywood, then do a remake. Come on.